So can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Let me, this is still not working. This is still not working. This is still not working. Is there still an echo? Yep. Is there still an echo now? Folks, can you hear me? All right, okay, you can hear me now? Okay, well, we can try to get started. What I had to do is I had to open up a whole new browser, my Chrome browser, both on my MacBook and my Windows computer, totally freaked out on me. And so it did not, neither one would allow me to select it. So I'm not sure what's going on with Chrome. I thought it was my MacBook because it just updated and was giving me weird things. But it seems like it's not that at all. It seems like it's Chrome because it was both on my Windows and my MacBook computer. So I'm sorry for all of that frustration. And so now what I'm going to do, I have no idea how to, I've never used this StreamYard on Firefox. I've never used the Firefox browser. It's got weird things that pop up every once in a while on me. Things like pop out this video, more screens are fun to play with, and I have no idea what it's doing or how to take them off. So we will try to work through this and see if it's worth your time. And and go through the process. You may notice that picture behind me. I just moved into a new office here downstairs. I had to vacate the office upstairs, and I'm not in the shop, as you can tell, because my granddaughter is going to move into that office. That was the deal when we moved in together. And so now I'm got a living room and office that works together. And so we'll see how all this works. Give me any feedback if things don't work. I get this thing that keeps popping up that says, pop out this window. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So let me hit the presentation, see if that works better. Select window or screen. I want to select a screen. Let's see if that's the right screen. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. This is a different interface. Would like to record. And I'm saying yes. All right. Allow. Okay, so if everything's working right, you should be able to see the screen that says key slab learnings. The original screen was supposed to be this one right here. As I say, as everything moved around, things got moved around. So the things I planned on talking about tonight, and since we've just spent 25 minutes trying to get the show on the road, probably won't get a chance to talk about all of them. But the first one that I wanted to talk about was key learnings from the Slab project that I recently did. And that consumed me for quite a while, actually. And it took up the last 3 weeks. And it was a very interesting learning process as I went through trying to learn about how to work on something that large. And I thought some of you might benefit from that in case you ever take on one of those things. And then the next thing I was going to do is I was going to share Brooks's video. If you haven't seen his video, I asked Brooks to go on live, but he said he couldn't do that because of bandwidth issues. I was going to share Brooks's video on how he makes material colors when he does vCarve inlays. You do need to have a spire to make it work, but I thought it was a unique workaround. And so we probably won't get to that. So what I prefer is likely is that you go check out his video, and I'll put a link to his video down in my video description when I post it. And the one thing that I would suggest is if you do have questions about that and you would like to see something on that, put something in the comments with a question mark or something so that Brooks might be able to comment on that. And then I was going to talk about insights on how I use AI, and I'll save that for a future because there won't be enough time to go through that, but I would like to go to OpenQA. So let's go right away to key learnings from the Slab, if that's okay with everybody. And so the next thing, what I wanted to talk about was the first thing you want to make sure is that you see the Slab in person. When I first got the Slab, I did get to see it in person, but I didn't want that yet. See if I can go over here to. So I got to see the Slab in person, but I wasn't quite sure what they were wanting with the Slab. So I'm going to share a couple pictures with you in a minute. The other thing you wanted to make sure was that you can spend the appropriate time on slab preparation and how important that becomes. And then setting up a template. This one was particularly challenging because you need to be able to set up a template to align the slab on the CNC. And the slab, when you see the shape of it, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not as easy as just putting it on the CNC and having an XY left corner or center to put the logo in the right place. And then how do you recover when you run into some CNC issues, which I did? And I'm not going to go into the details of the CNC issues as much as how you have to recover, have a plan to recover. And then there was some chip out on the logo that I designed. And then a little discussion about final sanding and preparation. That was the original plan, and we'll see what we get through, respecting all of your time. So let me spend a few minutes here showing some slabs, so showing some information about the slab job. So what it was I actually had a job where the person trying to get another window open here. Give a little background. Okay, so the person contacted me and they wanted their logo, this logo right here, put on a slab. So that meant I had to take this and convert this and model this as a 3D logo. They did not want the words. They just wanted the slab, the rolling hills and the sunset. That's what this represents at the hill's end. They wanted that carved onto a slab, and they were very specific about they wanted it as a slab. They did not want an epoxy project. They did not want any color. They wanted it on a slab, and they started sending me some slab pictures they thought was going to be acceptable. So originally over the Facebook, they said, we'd like this slab. And so I drove 3 hours where the slab store was. It was 3 hours from the house. I factored all that in, and I picked up this slab. And then, I don't know whether you can see it here, but let me get another close-up of the slab here for a second. And if you look at this, can you see the damage, how this all is? And as I started looking at this closer, trying to decide how well that would hold together as I carved that 3D logo in there, I got to the point where I wasn't sure how well that was going to carve. And so with that, I decided that I called the client and said, we're not going to be able to use that slab. So then we went to a different slab, which was this one right here. And you can see this is a beast. It's 3.5 inches thick. It does have some holes, a big hole right here in the front, but they really liked that. They wanted the rustic look. And it's got all kinds of checks and cracks here. And on the back, it's got several other holes, but this is the one that they wanted to pick. And so we went with this one right here. And so then I got the slab in the shop and laid it out. And obviously this old boy couldn't move this thing around by himself. So I had my son-in-law helping me put this on a material cart. I would move it around there. And so after looking at this, it was obvious that this slab needed stabilized with some kind of epoxy. So I went ahead and I contacted Super Clear Epoxy to try to find out whether I should be using penetrating epoxy, tabletop epoxy, or what epoxy I should use. And since I know several of you are interested in epoxy, I thought some of you might be interested in my conversation with them. And so after talking with them, they suggested that the best option for this, because I wanted to get as deep as I could in the cracks, and I didn't want it just sealing on the top, was to use a deep pour epoxy. I had some in the shop, and that they often will recommend people can use deep pour epoxy as a penetrating type of epoxy. So that's what I did. I went ahead and I
put the slab after pouring some deep pour epoxy in. I called my friends.
I went ahead and I poured a deep pour epoxy, mixed it up, and I pretty much just would pour it over the top and brush it in until I got it through all of the various areas where I saw a lot of checks and cracks and stuff. And then I let it sit for the next 3 or 4 or 5 days. It started to get, it was tacky all the way for 24 hours. And then after about 24 hours, it was hard, and you could actually touch it without getting stuck. But I didn't want to do anything for at least 5 days on it, just to make sure everything was hard.
Familiar with epoxy, the one thing I have to worry about is whether it...
So once I got it all poured in there and soaked in and it was hard, I went ahead and took a look at it again, and you can see the warping. I hope you can see the warping already there. And so I knew I was going to have to deal with that when I went to carve this slab, because remember the 3D logo, which you haven't seen the model of yet, but the 3D logo is actually one I originally proposed putting it in a dish so I wouldn't have to carve as much of the slab away. But they really wanted it to stand out. So the logo is going to be 1 inch tall. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is flatten this slab on the bottom and on the top. I'll show you some pictures in a minute about how much bow there is. So I have to take away enough to get that pretty flat. And then once it's flat, it's going to go down another inch from there. So even though I'm starting at 3.5 inches, the end result when I got all said and done was the slab and most of the area was about 1.75 inches tall. So I see no action going on in the comments section or anything else. Can you guys still hear me, or am I talking to myself? Just somebody say I can hear you. Something. Okay, thank you, Ellen. Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody else. Good. So I just want to make sure I just wasn't talking to myself, and I hadn't put all of you to sleep. So so the next one is, you can see how much the warp is right here. And is this stuff that you guys are interested in hearing? So if so, then give me a thumbs up so I know to keep going, or am I just boring you to death? Okay. So you can see how bowed this is. So I'm going to have to flatten this on the top. I'm going to have to flatten it on the bottom. And I have no idea what that one is. And so
the next step is to go ahead and take this slab and turn it over.
The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, but there's big holes in the back. And what you see this circle here is, this is me showing the client why I'm going to have to put some epoxy fill in here, because she really didn't want epoxy, but I told her you have to stabilize it. And so when I turn this over, if you look right here, and I think it's down over here, you're going to see, maybe it's down over here, you're going to see another hole that is pretty prolific. So here we go. So this is the back side of the epoxy, and you can see how through those cracks were. That's why I had this on plastic, is you can see where the deep pour epoxy started coming through these knots and the grain here. So it was an important thing to pour that in to prevent splintering and stuff. But now you can see the big holes here in the back. And these holes go almost all the way through in some cases. And so you heard me say how much I was going to have to shave off the back and the front. So you can imagine what's going to happen with these holes potentially as I start levelizing this and I start carving it. My biggest fear was I would carve it and there would be a big hole right in the middle of the logo or next to it and create problems. So I made sure I got all of this cleaned out, filled it up with epoxy so that when I did carve it, all you would see is epoxy. And I tried to color match the epoxy as much as I could with some brown. This gives you an idea of how deep the hole is, and this isn't even close because there's a deep part that I can't get down into. So you can see this hole, it's a 3.5 inch slab, and this hole is almost 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches here to start out with. And then of course, as you clean it out, it's going to be a lot deeper. You can see the level here and you can see how big it is. And then from there, you can get a good look at the hole down there. All of this has to be cleaned out completely without any bark. And so this one has some wood here that I'm going to have to knock out to get down there. And so I got some special.
Now I've turned over the slab.
I got some special tools, and this is just kind of a video that I showed the client to show them why I needed to put in the epoxy and how many holes were actually on the back that we needed to deal with. So I got some beefy tools, and I just went out and specially bought these tools that you can see here that were big porcupine tools. I don't know what else you call them, but they, you can see the ball. Go look at the ball over here, how big and how burly that is. And so what I did was break out this wood here, and I started the grinding inside of this hole and then over in this hole to make sure that they were completely bark free by the time I was done. And so that was the goal, was to get those completely bark free and clean. And I think you might see that in another picture. So I did that, and we got that all cleaned up, and then I went ahead and I poured the epoxy in the back. But sure enough, if you watch my epoxy videos, what's the one thing I'm always concerned about? And that is this here, right? Can you see this? This is, I had the plastic down in case there was a leak, and I was prepared for a leak, but I lulled myself into believing that if I use this special epoxy tape, Tyvek kind of tape, and I put it on really tight, that epoxy wasn't going to leak, because there was a little hole right here at the bottom, and I knew there was. So I did that, and you can see what occurred there. Well, as feared, I've got a leaker here, and so this hole was full, and it's shrinking down, and now you can see it's coming down all around here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some flex paste on this thing and see if we can get it. Now what I'm going to do is put some flex paste on this thing and see if we can get it stopped up. So if you've watched my epoxy instruction videos on my channel, you'll know I talk about flex paste a couple different times. And so here's an example of where it came in. There's the flex paste.
I'm not sure. Some will get on my floor, I'm sure. I'll clean that up if I can get the dripping stopped. So the first thing I want to do is kind of wipe up the drip.
So you see me just wiping up the epoxy, moving things around.
Didn't want to spill the flex paste, but give myself some room to work. I think right there.
So you see I pulled the tape back because it was just getting in the way and it wasn't going to allow a good bond. So I did that, and then I dig in there with the plastic spatula. And I started applying the flex paste liberally right to while it's leaking. There's still fluid leaking out of there at the time, and that's the beauty of this flex paste and why I always have it when I'm doing an epoxy deep pour. If I'm using a pool of epoxy, I don't worry about it when I have a multicolor pour where it's all contained within the carving. But whenever I'm doing a deep pour and I have a mold that's holding the epoxy in, or in this case, there wasn't a mold, I will make sure I have the flex paste handy and also make sure that I have plastic down below it. So none of this really got on the floor except for a couple drips, which I could wipe up. And you just see me working that flex paste all around until I had it all covered up. And sure enough, it did the trick. And I came back later that day. And then the next day, remember, it takes days for this stuff to leak. And that flex paste held the whole time. So hopefully you can get something from there. So I see that Lucky asked a question, given all the steps involved, what would you have done differently, if anything? Well, the biggest thing that I would have done differently, I believe, is when it came to the CNC work itself. And I'm not going to get into that because we don't have enough time on this show, and I don't want to bore all of you with all of that stuff. But one of the things, you saw how big that slab was, and before I get in, I'll show you this, a couple of pictures. Well, maybe I won't. Thought I had them under there. Let's see if it's what I got here.
All right, Shane. So now what we're doing is
Okay, so one of the things that you see is how big this slab is. And one of the things my buddy Shane, you guys know Shane Peters, we talked about tightening it down and how we were going to hold it down. And Shane said, with as heavy as this slab is, there is no way that thing's going to move. Make a long story short, when we were flattening it, it moved. And so that created a problem. And I can get into that in my video when I publish the video. But the bottom line is I took what was too deep of a pass that I don't believe should have been too deep of a pass. And if you're a Marks group, you heard me talk about the fact that it was a 2 millimeter pass. And it actually, and I did a short on that, and it actually moved this slab. And the spindle stopped, and I ended up having to buy a new spindle and replace Shane's spindle because of that. So the one thing, Lucky, is I would have made sure that the clamping process was much more defined and strong. I had this slab move once when we were tramming it or flattening it, and then I had it move again, even though we had some better clamping. But I was using those blue aluminum clamps, and they had loosened up when I was doing the actual carving. And I'll see if I can find that some carving pictures in a minute. So that was the thing that I would primarily have done different. So the next thing that was interesting with the slab was that I think you guys would be interested in is how do you align it? So here's the final slab picture. See if I can get that over there. So this is the final slab when it was all said and done. So you can see how the logo here is at an angle on this thing, and there is no like X, Y that you could line up in your Vectric software to find it. So the challenge was, how were we going to line this slab sitting on Shane's CNC so that it would actually cut right? So that's, let's see, not this one. So that's
Shane. So there's the alignment.
So that's what I did with this. I took in the software, I can show you in the software here in a second. I took in the software and I made a template of the logo, and I aligned the CNC so that it would rely on that. So here's the software. So one of the first things I did was, for those of you that have watched, and I did a video on this on my live a little while ago. If you look at, for example, under edit, if you look for material settings, you'll see I took a picture of Rosio, that's the lady's slab, and I rotated it in a way so that when I was locating the slab, so this is the 2D side and this is the 3D side, you can see I rotated the slab, the logo, so that it would fit on this slab right where I wanted it. And I could, by making sure that I had this slab in a way that I could see it, I could then move this logo around. Watch the logo over here, wherever I wanted. And so once I had it located in the spot that I wanted, let's say right here, probably easier if I move it on the picture. So let's say right here, because that's the material that the 3D image is seeing. And of course, I took the rotate part off there accidentally, so that goes right there. So once I had this, if I used a rectangle, I had the center of that logo. Can you see that? Hopefully that's making sense. So now I created a template by making another sheet. So what I did was I made a square template. I made another sheet over here, and you can see that right here. I said centering version. So now this is the other sheet that I made in the 2D mode. And all I did was I took the component from this one here, as you can do. I came over here. I took my smooth model and I copied it. I'm over here though, so I'm in the wrong spot. I copied it to this sheet. So now I had it on this sheet in the exact location of what a square would look like. And by doing that, I could put some bullseye marks, alignment marks here, and I can make a rectangle around it so that all I had to do when we put the slab on Shane's CNC, we had to make sure his gantry came straight across here, and would touch these 3 dots. We really didn't even needed to make sure it touched those 3 dots at first. That's a later. And you notice there's a center dot. So we made the slab, this logo, an XY center. And then what we did, now keep that in mind. This is what I'm looking for. So now you can see here's the square part. Here's the XY center. So we're going to place it on here. And so when we go, so you can see that so when we go to put it on Shane's CNC.
We're at the point where we put our template on the slab. And if everything works the way it's designed, when we're all said and done, we know exactly where this thing is going to carve. And when it's all said and done, that's where it'll carve from that 0 point. So now we're going to do a small profile cut, about 0.05 inches. It would easily stand out, and of that helmet, and then we'll know exactly where it's going to sit on the slab when we carve it.
So hopefully that made sense to everybody. I lined it up so it would come across here. And then once we had that all lined up and we've got the slab held down, of course, we didn't hold it down good enough. You can see that clamp wasn't very sturdy. We have another one back here and so forth. It did end up moving, but that's another thing. Like I said, the hold downs would have been better. Then I come up here to this picture. And what you can see me doing is we're just taking a V bit, a profile bit, and if you can see, let's see if we can get up a picture closer here. You can see that I can see exactly where the 3D carving is going to go. And once we have that, then we know that we're in the right location. So my advice to y'all is if you're going to do something that's kind of a strange location, the concept of building a template that you can put on there and off to get your CNC aligned in the specific area is critical. It makes a much better hold. Yes, dogs and wedges. There's a couple things we could have done, Brooks. You're absolutely right. Well, thank you, Lucky, for that super chat sticker. That's awful nice of you. I appreciate it, especially how rough this thing started out. So now let's go to the next one is how to recover when CNC issues happen. So all I want to say is that we moved the CNC a couple times. It gets you flabbergasted. And by having this template that we had right here.
So there's the alignment.
By having this template, we were able then to relocate it over the profile portion after we'd already started carving. Although it had moved, we could locate it over the 3D carving because we had the template right here. And we didn't need to just find the center. We could, but we had these bullseye marks, which allowed us to give like a triangulation, which allowed us to save the project when it moved. So again, I wanted to talk about how important that was. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was that, and I guess I didn't get all of these pictures in here where I thought I did, but I was going to show you how Shane just manipulated the CNC around it. And I did have a problem. Remember, I told you that, let's see if this is the picture. Yes. Remember, I told you that we had the thing move. It hit a knot right here, and it chipped out part of the logo. And I was just kind of sick about how I was going to fix that. Shane went down immediately right after that happened. He had some fast-drying Mohawk putty, and he wadded up a ball of it, and he stuck it in there. And then we waited for it to harden. It only took about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We continued to carve because we had to get everything rearranged. We continued to carve, and so it carved it out with the rest of the logo. But now we had that color mismatch. And so I wasn't quite sure how I was going to approach that. And I had this, let's see which video this one is. Not him. That's the guy. But this guy right here is a guy that I'm friends with at the San Diego Fine Woodworkers Association. He's a master finisher. And this, I just couldn't figure out how we were going to get that to match. And he said, no problem. So he went and he told me to go get some, whatever I had. And he had some stuff in his truck, but he just used some, what do you call that paint? The type of paint, I can't remember. It's just it's escaping me now, but it's normal paint that people use all the time. Starts with an A. Anyway, so he had the paint, acrylic, that was it, acrylic paints that we use for other projects. I went and got a bunch of them, and he took out some brown, and he started dabbing it on there, and then he took out some black, and he started dabbing it on there so it would align with the grain. And I wanted to show you how well he went from that one picture to the end and what can actually be done if you got patience and you got an eye for art. And I was just impressed with what he did here. So
you see more ultraviolet.
So you can see it's already working through.
But they think most people could do different things.
That I was able to record. I was trying to record it. So you can see him just simply being patient and painting, and he put a little bit of lacquer on there because I finished it with lacquer, and then he'd paint a little more. He put a little lacquer on there. And in the end, so that's how it started. And that's what it ended up like when he was all said and done. you can see how it follows the grain and the shading, and the client didn't even notice. And when we were all said and done, unless you're looking for it and you really noticed, you'd never know that that was a big chunk of wood that had gotten out of that. And I just thought that was yeah, it was acrylic, Brooks, exactly. So I thought that was pretty cool, and the way he did that. And then the one thing that I would also mention was he made a big point out of sanding by hand. And I've always used a random orbital sander. And I sanded by hand. And can you see these scratches in here? And then in the main body.
You look real close here.
In the main body, there were
see scratch marks that I put in.
There were scratches
Sanded by hand
in the logo, and there were scratches in the main body. And I had gone ahead and said, well, maybe they'll get taken up when if I put the finish on there. And you can't see it with this picture, but if you look at here, you'll see fine line scratches in here, and it drove me crazy. So I resanded the whole thing after the first coats of finish. And I think I even talked to Lucky about this, called him up. And I resanded everything with my random orbital sander back up to 220 grit. So I went down to 120, and I resanded everything with my surf prep sander, which is a 3x4 sander. And I worked through the grits, and it came out absolutely spectacular, or gorgeous, I would say, in the end. And so here's the final slab as it looks in the hotel right there, and they were very happy with it when it was all said and done. So the key lessons learned, once again, was take your time to make sure the prep is actually good. And if you're using epoxy, make sure you have flex paste ready or something else to take care of the leaks, because if it can leak, it will leak. You've heard that before. And then the other thing was the importance of, no matter how big the slab is, the importance of making sure that that big old slab, I mean, that thing must have weighed 300 pounds when we started. When we finished, it was probably only about 150 to 200 pounds. But when we started, that's how big it was. But make sure that you've got a good way to hold the slab down on your CNC, and you're not going to take a chance on it moving at all, because that will create problems, and it did. And then the other one that was the big takeaway, when you have something that's an irregular object, take the time to figure out how to make a template that you can locate it on the machine, whether it's a laser or a CNC, and make sure that the logo or whatever it is you're designing will go in the exact right place. And then if something happens, that you're able to come back and redo it in a way that you haven't lost the whole job. So those are some of the key learnings, I think. I think that we can all learn from that. So now I see a question here. When flattening the slab and you are not sure of the proper depth of cut, is it best to test that on Shane's Laguna? Well, Shane probably didn't think so, but I didn't think I was testing it. I mean, his Laguna, he doesn't have a Laguna, but he has a Swift. I have the Laguna, which is supposed to be a smaller, weaker CNC. But it turns out that Shane's Laguna spindle and Shane's Swift, he has a Swift spindle, and my Laguna spindle, he's got a 5x10 machine. I have a 2x3 machine. We both use the same exact spindle, 3 horsepower. So I know that I've cut 2 millimeters before without a problem. I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but I witnessed it firsthand, and I felt terrible. But I paid for the repairs and made sure that it was up and running, but it was a very frustrating thing. Good question, Jim. All right, any other questions about the slab or lessons learned? So with that, I'm out of time by what I normally do, but I would like to share this because I'll save the AI for next time. Let me bring something else over here and we'll see how well it works. I don't know how many of you got a chance to see Brooks's video. And we're always looking for ways that we can present things to our clients. That's why you saw me talk about how I changed the materials, how I brought the slab into the materials database. If you haven't seen that, go back and look at that live video about a month ago where I talked about that, or if you'd like more information on that, it's possible. But using that material database where you can go get the textures and apply them in different ways is important. And I know that Mark has a whole video on that you can go, he will show you how to bring in different materials into the database. So with that, let's talk about this example. In this example, thank you, Lou. In this example, what is happening is, and I didn't know what Brooks was talking about at first, and once I saw it, I said, that's great. Now, you do need a spire, but if this is a good example that if you're doing vCarve inlays for a client and the client wants to see what it looks like with that various wood application, Brooks has come up with a way by working with Michael Mazalik and a couple other people. I don't know everybody that Brooks worked with. He had it in his list, but I amply forgot. Brooks will get all credit. And so I wanted you to take a look at this video, and the technique that Brooks uses in this video is by changing the material database and then using the characteristics or the properties of a spire to be able to make his vCarve inlay show what the material actually looks like when he wants to present it to a client. And I just thought it was really cool. And if you haven't had a chance to see his video, go watch it over his channel. I'll list it, but here it is right here. It's only 5 minutes and thought it was worth your watch. Here we go.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is a little quick video I'm going to do to show 2 different ways to present your projects to your clients or to whomever you're going to give it to or show it to. One on the right you see is the typical preview toolpath where we assign colors to each toolpath through this tab here. You have the drop down, you can pick colors. What this all came about is I was putting together a wish list or dream sheet for the version 13 of Vectors. And I mentioned to Michael Mazalik that, I wish they could let us put materials in here for our toolpaths, such as here, where you can pick whatever you want. And he said there is a technique where you can just quote, toolpaths can be inlaid in your vectors. And we'll walk through that today. The process is you need to make a component for each one of these set of vectors. And here's all the vectors. They're all grouped. This one's grouped, this one's grouped, and this one's grouped. Key thing is, you see what happens when you don't have a zero plane on it. This sort, you're looking at the modeling plane, and hence the video on the picture in the background doesn't show up. So if we turn that on, the zero plane, we get a good representation of the block material. How did we create these? How did this get created? Well, we had to go back to the vectors here, and we created a model, 3D component. And what I did was just click here with 0 height, named it, we'll call that Turtle 2. And bam, there we are. So close that, go over to the 3D view, and inside the properties tab, we can now change it from same as parent to use material. And we can pick any one of these colors that are, any one of these textures, which are in the open application folders. And then it will show you the bitmap textures under stone or wood. You have all these pictures. You can add to this pretty easily. Just make a bitmap of it or a JPEG and drop it into this folder, and it will populate that window down here. So let's pick one. Walnut and green. That sounds good. And that's what it looks like. Bam. Zero height. We'll do that again with the others. This time we'll, what I'm calling the scales, create a component here, and scales 2. Create, close, and we're in the 3D view. Click on the scales and change it to use material. What I want here is maple, something light. Shows up. And click off of it. Oh, there's that 0 point. And now we can start to see these things accented. The third one, pretty simple, is what I call the tiles. Create another one here. Name it. Tiles 2. Great. And go over to 3D view. Go into the properties of it. And use materials. And I want to use Hadoop Endgrain. Close it, click off of it, and there it is. Compared to these two. So in a nutshell, you can present this, and all you got to really do is I use a snipping tool and do something like this, save it off, and then you can send that to your customer. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you get something out of this. I think it's a pretty cool approach.
So I thought Brooks's approach was pretty unique and helpful, and so I wanted to get a chance to share it to a larger audience in case it didn't look like that many people had watched his video at the time I watched it. So I wanted to make sure the rest of you had that opportunity. I also wanted to share the concept that whole technique of using that material database comes in very handy for many, many things. And so it's important to remember that. And you can do it either when you're setting up the material or as you're doing the tool pass, like he was doing when he was setting up the components. And it's something that if you're trying to present material to clients, that it's something that's important to be able to know how to do that. And let me give you another example of this, and let me see if I can get this to share again. So here's my database, or here's my screen that I showed before. And if you go up here to appearance, and that's basically the material database, there you can add a section, as Brooks said, and Mark covers this and I cover this in different videos, but you can add a whole section down here that says special backgrounds. and I want to show you how often I use it. So here's another slab that I did for somebody else, and I said, okay, this is a picture of the slab in its horizontal version. And so now the picture you can see is going to change to this other slab. So this was the original slab that I had used on that material, as you might remember. If I turn around and I change that again to I wanted a special charcuterie board I did for somebody. So I changed the look of the material to this slab, and it will fit whatever it wants to whatever the size of the material is that you're using. And so it's not getting the whole slab here because this was just a little piece of wood, and so it'll put in there what it fits. So, but using that material change is something that is invaluable. If you weren't aware of it or haven't used it, you really should take a look at learning how to do that. All right, that's all I have, and I'll go into the AI stuff next time. I'm using it a lot these days. I'm using it for everything, not only my woodworking, but day to day, I'm using it to generate ideas for projects, as well as just to look up information. I'll give you an example. If I want to know how big I should make the knurled knob for an insert that I'm going to put into a piece of plastic, I will say for a 6 millimeter knurled knob, what would be the typical hole dimension? I don't know if that makes sense to everybody else, but there's anything I'm needing to know these days, I'm going to the Chat GPT, and I'm looking it up. So let me give you an example of some recent things. Now, what I do is I use it so often. I have an AI resources tab, and I have a Chat GPT there. And before I had all that Google issue to start with, I had this all up and ready to run, rock and roll. So I'll just keep you another minute. But this can be so useful. So, for example, if I wanted to find out, give me 20 ideas for 3D projects carved in wood that San Diego residents or tourists would be interested in. So you can see it starts giving me ideas. Now, Ellen, you were in that show last night. You could simply say, give me 20 ideas for projects, do-it-yourself projects, CNC projects, laser engraving projects that people may be interested in buying this year. And it would give you a list of projects. And so then you would go ahead and start asking your AI for something like, give me examples of AI information would work for that. So let me go real quickly. I won't go to the AI to generate it, but one of the things I would share with you is I have a folder over here that I've started collecting them, and I actually got this idea from Mr. Michael Bernasconi. So I've got a folder. These are all AI ones. So for example, I've got ideas for SDFWA models. So I started collecting these relief models those are just some examples that I got out of AI, and then I can take those models and I can start working So I'm not getting into the details how to do this. That's what I was going to try to do. But just real quickly, I can take those ideas, for example, and start feeding them into the Aspire software. And next thing you know, I've got my models built and ready to carve. And so I think it's pretty impressive with what you can do these days. And just thought I'd share that with you. Don't just limit yourself to trying to get the AI ideas of the art from the art AI. Go get your ideas for what to ask the AI art from, and then go ask artificial intelligence for the prompts to use. So I even asked, what prompts should I use if I want to try to get this result? And the AI will actually tell me what kind of keywords and things I should put in my prompts. So now I've definitely gone beyond, not the hour that I promised you, but the time frame I would say I would wrap up. So I'll leave this up. One last thing. Any questions? If not, I just want to say, hey, I really appreciate the fact that y'all stuck out with me as I struggled for the first 20, 25 minutes trying to get a browser that would work. And I'm going to go try to figure that out. And Lucky, I really appreciate your super sticker. That's helpful, and I appreciate the support. And if there's nothing else, then I'll go ahead and wrap this out. And next time I'll try to get into a little more how I specifically use the AI. That's what I'd hoped to do today. With that, have a great night. Thanks for attending, and looking forward to the next time we get together. Have a good day.